they will be staying where they are. And that is the best solution to keeping them housed in a most affordable manner. So appreciate everything you've said. Go ahead, Linda.
Just one quick note. I would guess, there's no way of me tracking this, but I would guess that 50% of tenants or more would never go to a hearing, would never get a hearing. I mean, they never get that far. They move out when they get the notices. They move out long before a landlord goes to the landlord-tenant board. So the huge wave is invisible. The big wave is invisible.
Well, and one of the recommendations from the Housing Task Force, which led to the formation of this committee, is a public education piece. And the meeting we're having right now is being broadcast, and it will be available afterwards through the town website and through Facebook. So we'll make sure we share that to give broader understanding. But we will also be holding public information sessions in the near future, and we'll look forward to having you involved. At this point, I'm sure there's probably questions and comments from the group. So I'll open up the floor to anyone who would like to ask Linda a question or make any comments. Any hands up? Jeff?
You're on mute there, Jeff.
And please, if you can, please use your hand icon, put it up there and leave it up there, and then I'll be prepared to catch you as we go through here. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks for this, Linda. Just a comment. It really, when people hear the rates for ODSP and OW versus the rates for rent, it really speaks to guaranteed annual income and that discussion that needs to take place in our province and in our country. I was happy as a landlord, personally I'm a landlord and I work for an agency that's a landlord. I was happy to hear from time to time when you didn't call us wolves, but said that there were good landlords among us. And I was happy to hear that. I think it's easy for us to fall into discussion in general terms about landlords versus tenants. And when we're talking about affordable housing and housing people, this is a collaborative venture that we're in, and that we need to respect both sides. I know of a woman who I've helped support who's 77 and a senior who needs the rent that she gets from her unit. And it's very difficult when she doesn't get that rent because she's got expenses. And it's, I think we have to be very careful when we talk in generalities, because each of these cases that goes before the Landlord-Tenant Act, Landlord-Tenant Bureau is an individual case, and they're all very, very different. What you said about rent evictions and all of that, really, really take that to heart. I think that's a terrible, terrible situation. I just wanted to put it out there that there are times for legal eviction. And so,
absolutely. 100%.
It's, yeah.
One of the biggest problems, Jeff, if you don't mind me jumping in, is these ridiculous delays and the terrible processes. I am finding, and why I say that we can prevent evictions in so many cases is the reality, sir, is that landlords in our community have been very, very decent. And they're voluntarily agreeing to very long repayment plans and extended dates for folks who are way, way too behind in their rent. And I'm watching landlords not just sell their homes, but lose their homes if they don't sell them. You know, there are landlords going under. And it's partly because the Landlord-Tenant Board is not functioning in a reasonable way. There's neither for tenants nor landlords. We have a lot of good landlords in our community, and honestly, I am proud to live in this community, and I feel that we look after our own very, very well. But the system is problematic because there is no incentives for folks to keep rents low. There's no rewards. And frankly, it's often not sustainable for landlords. I mean, a lot of our landlords are ma and pa landlords. And some of our landlords are good nonprofit housing landlords too. And, or small landlords. I have nothing bad to say about the majority of folks.
Just a couple of points. One, I think that we're suffering now because of political decisions made decades before.
Absolutely.
And so we have to be very vigilant when we see things coming down the pike in terms of housing policy. The other point is to you, Mayor Panko, you were almost jumping in there about offering a place for people to go on these calls. And I think that that's something that we should be looking at through this task force, that making access to landlord-tenant hearings easier for people, for tenants, and possibly even landlords. So,
but I really believe that justice will not be done for landlords or tenants if we continue with this digital platform. Our hearings were normally done at the is it the Comfort Inn now, the Mariners Inn, you know, the place by the waterfront there, and we've been doing it for years, and it was a good, humane place. It's far from perfect, but when you're looking people in the eye or sitting across a table and you're saying, how can we deal with this problem? Yes, there's a problem, but how do we fix it? We could do some really good collaborative work there, and it sure helps to humanize folks. And, you know, being a black box on a screen, if you're lucky enough to be on the screen.
Exactly.
It's a terrible process.
Carrie, you had a question? Comment?
I do. Thanks, Linda. And I mean, I've only had interactions with you mostly on freedom of information requests and majority of that. So it's nice to finally see you. But most of those pertain to property standards. Mm-hmm. So one of the recommendations coming out of the Housing Task Force was regarding our property standards bylaw and, you know, making it, I guess, more beefing it up, I guess, to make sure our properties are, you know, in a good livable state as well as aesthetically pleasing. One of the items that we've been dealing with, and I know Mayor Panko's kind of been in the middle of these discussions, was items like black mold or items like cockroaches, where our bylaw doesn't have anything in it regarding that, because historically that's always been dealt with through the health unit. However, that's not the case anymore. And so we have, you know, it's been indicated to us that bugs and cockroaches, although an inconvenience, are not a health hazard. And when it comes to black mold, I mean, we don't have the instruments, the technology, you know, whatever's required to indicate whether there's black mold in somebody's apartment or in their home. So where do we go? Do you have any recommendations for us?
That's a great question, Carrie. And thank you, by the way, for all the great work you've done in providing those reports to us. It makes all the difference. It really does. I know we don't want them yesterday, and we probably don't have our paperwork properly prepared. But anyway.
That's my job.
Thank you. But it's a really, really good question. And, you know, this is an area where Smiths Falls, okay, I'm just going to say it. You could do better. You could do better. We're not getting people out quick enough. We're not getting reports issued often enough. I know COVID has been a really, really big problem, but we've been struggling with property standards issues in Smiths Falls for as long as I've been here, 20 years or more. And there's good reasons. The market was quite depressed. The buildings were dilapidated and the rents were low. And that's a reality. But guess what? We have a boom now. The buildings won't be dilapidated and the rents won't be low. And, you know, things have changed a lot. And it is a good time to look at your property standards bylaw and beef it up. There are ways of dealing with the vermin issue, which is a huge problem. Bed bugs, definitely a problem. Cockroaches, definitely a problem. We can all agree on that, can't we, Mayor Panko? We've had the same people sitting in our offices and wondering about whether or not we've got cockroaches as well. Or bed bugs. Yeah, God forbid. There's a lot of bed bugs. You could do some changes to your property standards bylaw. You could look at putting more resources into enforcement. I know that it's collaborative first, and I get that, but that is an area where Smiths Falls could improve the living conditions for tenants remarkably. And the other thing is you could also take some of the burden off Carrie by making all work orders public. In the city of Toronto, you can ask for any work order, you get it immediately by email. They don't care who you are. There is case law from the Ontario Information and Privacy Commission, I've been known to do appeals there, that says that work orders are public for all to see. There's a thought, then you wouldn't get those awful freedom of information requests at all. There's stuff you guys can do. I would love to meet with you separately about what you can do, and more likely privately, I think, about what you can do to, it doesn't have to be privately, I mean, I don't care, but what you can do to improve your property standards system, because that would be a real added bonus. And honestly, with me, I would prefer not to have to take tenants go with tenants to the landlord and tenant board over property standards. I would like to see a good enforcement, a good system that tenants can access without frustrations, that's quick and efficient and reasonable, with reasonable timelines given to landlords, and see that work. I wouldn't be taking landlords to the landlord and tenant board and suing them for $20,000 and bankrupting them. I don't want to do that. I want families and singles to have decent living conditions, not perfect, but healthy and decent. And we could all improve in that department. Smiths Falls is no different than any other community. There's a lot of challenges.
I will definitely take you up on that offer.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Be happy to do that.
Thank you, Linda.
Kelly,
Anytime.
you're up next.
Oops. Yeah, I picked the right day to join. That was great. Thank you so much. Linda, I'm with Rideau Community Health Services. So our team, community support workers and complex nurses work with a lot of these folks. And so you provided a lot of really good information today. We do, for me, that I'll pass along, and we do sort of a situation table as well. And I just have to say, it is the number one issue that keeps coming up. There's sometimes multiple issues, but housing just keeps coming up as an issue. So I hear what you're saying, and you did give some really good information that I will pass along. And I was really pleased to hear this will be recorded. So we don't have to invite you as a guest speaker. I can just have our teams watch the recording. That will be, I think, really helpful. And
Great.
Just knowing that there, some of the tips that you gave will help our teams to know that there is something perhaps they can do to help people if they can catch it in time. And I know they do refer to the legal clinic and certainly know about that, but there's some extra details I think that'll be really helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, so Kelly, on that note, and for everybody's sake, I have a presentation that I created last year. It's a PowerPoint that I'm quite happy to do on Zoom or otherwise, or in person, called Tenant Protection First Aid. And it's primarily directed towards community frontline workers, as well as advocates, it's kind of for everybody, but the focus was to try to make every door, a possible answer to a question, and give folks like yourself some tools to know what to say to tenants, because sometimes the wrong advice can make situations worse. And I would very much like to continue doing those presentations. I modify them. It's a pretty long presentation on the ins and outs of landlord-tenant law in Ontario. There are a lot of myths, and say the word and I'll do another one.
Okay.
I have to say, though, I don't right now have a training for landlords, just so you know, because it's never been our mandate. But I would be very happy to provide in-service trainings, public training, all sorts of stuff, because frankly, the more we get information to people early, correct information early, makes a huge difference. You would be amazed. It's really shocking how much misinformation is out there. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Any further questions? Courtney? Did you have your hand up?
Courtney's muted, eh?
Okay, so it must just be
Okay.
showing up on my screen.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Linda, thank you again.
Thank you. I will sign off. And yeah, if you do want to have any specific discussions about, I didn't know this was going to be broadcast, so I'm very glad I didn't point too many fingers. Hi, Carl, by the way. Carl and I are friends. Yeah, so I'm really glad I didn't say more than I did.
You said what we need to hear.
Okay, I appreciate that very much, and good for you guys. Honestly, I said a lot of negative things, but there's a lot of good people doing a lot of good work, and I'm constantly reassured of that. And that's one of the great things about living in Lanark County and the area we do is we really do look after our own folks. I really notice the difference when I'm dealing with this region. I mean, even in Brockville, it's quite different. The bigger numbers, less connected. We do look after our own, and we need to keep doing that.
Well, and that's why we're here.
I know. I have great faith in you guys. All right. All right. I'm going to sign off then.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks so much, by the way. Much appreciated. Bye, everybody.
Okay. Outstanding. As I think we all agree with that. And while it's a message that may be difficult to swallow, it's something we definitely need to hear. So moving on to through our agenda, we've got 2 more items and priority issues. We've got about half an hour left, so we should be able to get through them. So Carl, community improvement plan to incentivize affordable housing.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I know I've had some wonky internet over the last little while. So good afternoon, everyone. I think we've all heard momentarily about I guess looking at some tools that are available to us to incent and encourage the development of affordable housing in the community, and certainly there's regulatory provisions about zoning that we're looking at, and we discussed that in detail last week. We've hired planning consultants to undertake a review of the zoning bylaw. But there's also, I think we've all recognized too, it's not something that we can simply do ourselves. There's a partnership aspect involved, and also looking at potential incentives and to do this. And one of those is the community improvement plan. So one of the recommendations out of the background, the housing task force, was that we explore a community improvement plan to support the creation of affordable units. And I've expanded on that. In this report here that's presented to the committee. This is pretty similar thematically to a report I presented to the housing task force about 1.5 years ago, and it's been updated a little bit. But a community improvement plan is one of those. It's one of those areas where municipalities can legally, once adopted, can legally provide incentives, either in the terms of tax relief, development charges, rebates, loans, a variety of other programs to support a community gain. And we currently have a community improvement plan right now, and that applies to our downtown core that looks at development through that looks at facade improvements and interior renovations through an economic development and heritage lens, and we have funded some improvements to downtown core properties. However, we also have the ability to look at a community improvement plan for the entire town to achieve community benefits, and one of those, of course, is affordability. We can also look at accessibility or any other community benefit that council has identified. So it is intended to be flexible, comprehensive, coordinated, and strategic. And so that's broadly what a community improvement plan is. A number of municipalities have adopted affordable housing community improvement plans, and that looks at loan programs, either for individual units or perhaps something a lot broader, affordable unit grant programs, tax increment financing, planning and building fee rebates, feasibility study rebates, or development charge rebates. So those are all things that other municipalities in Ontario have looked at. So a key task for an affordable CIP is, of course, to define what is meant by affordability. How do we define it? How long would vision, how this improvement plan? It's a detailed and
Carl. Sorry, Carl, we're losing you. Carl.
And it's very similar to
Carl. Sorry, Carl, we're losing you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, maybe turn your video off and see if that gives you enough bandwidth. At least if we can hear you, it's probably the most important.
I think we just lost him entirely, Mayor Panko.
We lost him altogether.
He'll probably try to log back in a second.
Yeah.
There he goes.
Okay.
He's coming back. There it is.
Are you with us, Carol?
I heard everything, and then I just got removed. Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's better. Sorry, we missed probably the last at least 30 seconds or 40 seconds of what you said.
Okay. Okay, I apologize about that. Rural internet is usually good, but occasionally it does glitch. So the process for adopting a community improvement plan is similar to that which we'd follow to adopt an official plan. And that includes a public consultation component and at least one public meeting. And that's important for us to identify issues and solicit feedback. So a lot of larger municipalities, Peterborough, Sudbury, Belleville, I think some smaller ones like Kenora have developed community improvement plans for affordable housing. But of course, they're different communities than us. So we want to be able to target this to what would work and what the demand would be in Smith Falls. We'd also have to consult the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. So an affordable housing CIP, in our opinion, presents a potentially workable tool to leverage municipal support with private sector expertise. So it is an involved process. These would typically be contracted out to a third-party consultant if we were to undertake this plan. Unfortunately, that's not provided for in the 2021 budget. Staff did reach out to our colleagues in other municipalities who have similar plans, looking just for an indication on how much these would cost, and we didn't get enough broad feedback to be able to give a really good answer. But we're going to. A preliminary estimate suggests that it could be in the range of 20,000 to 50,000, depending on the scope. So it's a larger ticket item, but I think it is something that certainly can have some real advantages to the community, and it could look at prescribing a number of different an affordability threshold or anything that any sort of find the right policy mix that encourages development, but ensures that developers are motivated to and incented to create affordable units in that. So I think this is intended to provide a fairly high level overview of what a CIP, an affordable housing CIP, looks like, and just condition of. I'll welcome any conversation or discussion from the committee on that, and look for your direction on next steps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Hopefully you can hang in there. Questions and comments, and Vicky, you're first.
I'm just curious, would it apply to older builds as well as new builds, or just strictly new builds? The CIP.
Carl?
The terms of the plan would be as established by council, but typically it's triggered. Typically it's new development or renovation of existing development to create new units that would flag this opportunity if a proponent is interested in creating affordable units.
Okay.
Anyone else? Lindsay, I'd like to hear from your perspective as a developer on creating affordable units and the role that a CIP could play in incentivizing and encouraging developers to do so.
Yeah, like the biggest obstacle for any developer comes down to financing, and outside of obviously wanting to invest into something that isn't a net negative. Myself and many others, we aren't cash developers. We still borrow our money to develop. And what we have to work with is the lending restrictions that come into play, not only for building to keep, but building to sell. And so really the things that come down to that is understanding how a bank will go about financing a property and the debt servicing ratios that a building has to achieve for them to get anywhere from 65% loan to value to 80% loan to value. And that all comes down to the revenue and the expenses. So if a program can help a development offset some expenses, which really I think the only one would be is property taxes, but it's a huge one. Property taxes are, I think, 8 to 10% of a 25% estimated expense on the income. That does have a huge impact. So, I could even, if I reference my numbers on Phillip Street, I think it's $18,000 is what I've projected the taxes to be across both buildings. So $9,000 to $10,000. And if I can actually pull it up right now, because I often keep my cash flow sheets handy. Reducing those expenses by 1% point can allow a building to debt service at a ratio that a lender needs it to with $100 less per unit a month. They have a huge impact on those revenue requirements. So, I think if the town was able to say to developers, for every unit that you deem to be affordable, we'll knock off 1% of your taxes or 2%. That actually does equalize out. I can do a lot of math on that and present something to the group. I do math all the time. I love doing it. So I could run a few examples for people to understand the impact of a simple 1% deduction on property taxes and really what that applies. So I do think the improvement program, if we were to use that towards some credits or deductions on the property taxes, that would have a huge impact. I think there has to be a ton of policy behind. You have to provide the lease showing that the units are actually, you have the affordable units that you say you're going to have in there. There has to be like an annual check too. If you put that lease in place for 1 year and then, turn it over, you should not qualify for that tax benefit. So there would be some annual checking there. And then in terms of everything else, again, the town does a great job. No development fees. That's a huge incentive. In Ottawa, we pay $18,000 a unit we add to a property. So if I'm building a 10-unit building here in Ottawa, it's $180,000 I have to give the city before I get my permit. And you don't have to do that in Smiths Falls. I think in retrospect, maybe developments that don't offer affordable housing, you should start charging development fees and use those monies to then go towards the funds needed for affordable housing. I think people are getting away with it right now in town. And if they aren't implementing things that the town truly needs, then you're not going to get a free ride anymore. And I think, a $2,000 development fee per unit is extremely reasonable because the prices that we're seeing in Smiths Falls are only a couple $100 less than Ottawa right now, but it costs $18,000 to add a unit in Ottawa. And it's nothing in Smiths Falls right now. And I think there's a lot of opportunity that, again, If you come in and you don't create affordable units, accessible units, well, I mean, you're just not going to benefit then anymore. So I think those two things.
Thanks, Lindsay. And we have embarked on a developmental charge study. And it's not finalized yet, but we've had our interim report. And one of the potential outcomes would be of a community affordable housing CIP would be, if we do implement DCs on residential units, would be the possibility to waive those, as you suggested. So thank you.
I think that's a great controlling policy because there has been a ton of housing development in the area. There's a lot of people moving to the area. It's great. It's really added, I would say, probably to some of the local economy. I find it very hard to get trades right now. So this is good because we do try to work locally. But I now think we've got to stop that little peak that we've allowed people to enter into and now go, okay, only for free or only waived if you provide a certain percentage based off the number of units. And I would highly encourage waiving all developmental fees for any building that does provide affordable housing, because even if it's one unit, that's one unit you don't have. But anyone that does not provide it, I mean, you're done.
Thanks, Lindsay. Additional comments? So I think, Lorraine.
I just wanted to thank Lindsay for her comments because I agree with her very much. I think that being able to motivate builders to put a percentage of their building affordable is something we want to do. I mean, I know from my colleagues in our conversation around housing, we want to be able to do that. So I think that's a great suggestion. And I know with the CIP that we use for heritage motivation for people to reach out and, take care of their heritage properties, it seems to be working. And yeah, I think it's something we should look at and consider. Thank you for that.
Carl?
The neat thing about this tool is it allows us to customize for scope. So for instance, if we were looking at targeting or supporting in small scale conversion, somebody looking to duplex or triplex an existing home, for instance, with affordable units, we can look at, say, a loan program or something targeted in smaller scale. If we're looking at a larger development with many units, then a tax abatement could be those are complex, as Lindsay had indicated. Typically they're implemented through a separate agreement, but the way that often works is whatever the increase in tax revenue that we would get from a project, a portion of that would be rebated to the developer in fulfillment of the terms we establish. So that in and of itself would need to be defined and carefully spelled out in the plan. But there's a lot of flexibility for us to achieve the municipal, whatever the community need is identified and how we want to target that.
Yeah, and secondary units we'll speak of shortly, but I would even see a CIP as an opportunity to incentivize homeowners to add a secondary unit to their property, whether that's a basement apartment or a coach house or something to that effect. So, Jeff? Oh, Jeff, you're on mute.
God, you wouldn't believe how many times I tell people they're on mute. So thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Lindsay. I think that was a really good suggestion, and we certainly don't want to lose that about development charges. Carl, thank you for bringing this one forward. I think for this group, this is possibly a really powerful yet low-hanging fruit that we could do. You did mention that involved in the process of expanding the CIP would be a public consultation, one public meeting. What do you see the time frame to turn this around would be? Because I think that it would be a feather in our cap as this group if we could do this as quickly as possible. What do you think about that?
Carl?
It doesn't appear that this is a project that would be able to be accommodated within in-house. So we would likely need to retain consultants who have expertise in the field. We don't have a budget allocation in 2021. So certainly depending on on budget, it would simply, the next step would be to issue the request for proposal and
Sorry, Carl.
Begin that process.
Lindsay?
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to kind of add to that was a really big frustration, because again, I develop both in Smiths Falls and in Ottawa. A lot of us who develop in Ottawa, and we pay these fees, we pay these massive also site registration, control plan agreement fees and stuff. We actually don't know where that money goes. And, you know, I've often said, you know, we're paying to densify these fees. It'd be nice to see that exactly what we're paying goes into also the city doing its part and bringing that money forward. And I would just really love to see finally a town or a city go, all the developmental fees that we get, we either create our own supply or we then give subsidies to our residents. And I'd love to just see that money flow in that direction versus, I mean, in Ottawa, we have a lot of sprawl, so it goes towards a lot of infrastructure. Smiths Falls is pretty, I mean, I don't think there would be a lot of sprawl happening. So I can really see that money going back into the town. But I think like if we can really encourage full transparency of all the development fees that are received every year and how it's spent, to show like the town, like this is, yes, we've let a lot of development happen, but this is what we've benefited from for you local residences from that from those fees.
Excellent, thank you. So we've had a fair amount of discussion here. We're getting close to the end of our meeting, but so Carl's comment, it's probably a $20,000 to $50,000 expense. We would have to hire outside consultants to do so. If we could wait until next year, which puts us off for 6 months, or we can make a request to council to fast track the development of a community-wide affordable housing community improvement plan, and we will leave it up to staff to find some reserves or money that we could draw from in order to fast track this priority. Is that something that this group supports? And I'd like to hear, I guess, feedback so that we bring this to council. We have complete consensus. Jeff? Sorry, Vicky, and then Jeff.
Just quickly, I do agree that it should be expedited given the situation we are facing is more than critical.
Thank you, Vicky. Jeff?
I agree with that. I think it's also a question for staff and how much is on their plate and how they can handle it. What Carl was saying, it kind of goes out of house to have a consultant work on that, but it does add work to the planning department. Could it happen sooner, Carl?
Well, I think we'll, on a regular basis, we do assess our workload, our priorities, and sort of how we frame the various projects that we are working on. So certainly, if it is a priority of council and the municipality to move this to the top of the list, then that's something we'll definitely work on to fulfill.
Thanks, Carl. Lindsay?
I just don't know how to put down my hand. I'm trying to Google it as this is happening.
I have the same issue, press reactions.
Just ignore my hand.
Okay. Well, are you in agreement? We should.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't even know how to put
Ellie?
my hand up.
Oh, sorry, Courtney. Is that you? Yeah. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah. Sorry. I don't know how to put my hand up on here.
That's okay. We can hear you.
But I just wanted to say that I'm also like fully in agreement with like fast. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my internet's not that good. I just wanted to say I totally agree with fast tracking it and like making that priority.
Thank you. We will. The other factor we do want to discuss that may form part of that would also be accessible units. And I think we want to add that probably to our next meeting for discussion. But so Courtney, thanks for your support today. And Ellie.
Sorry. I just kind of wanted to, I guess, touch on to do the community improvement plan. Like we're looking at like 15 to 20K. Like that's a lot of money, in my opinion, when we have a lot of people who could really use rent supplements and affordable housing right now. And maybe looking at other options that there are available, like I get putting out an RFP, but like also like connecting with universities and seeing what they're doing. And if, you know, we have the availability or the capability to kind of look at other options rather than spending money on a consultation that, not to be blunt, but like isn't directly needed. Like we can connect with Ontario Works and we can connect with ODSP, and we have Lanark County Housing, and we've already done like the task force did their survey last year. Like I feel like there's a lot of information that you could quite simply put together for a meta-analysis, or quite simply and easily put together a needs analysis. That, and I'm not saying that like we need to do that, but I'm saying that that's quite simple, and that's something that a university student would happily do. Like I'm doing a program right now, and so we have to do that for organizations all the time. I'm just thinking our money could be better used when we already know the information. That's just my thoughts.
Okay. Carl, can you comment on that?
Yes, certainly. So with respect to creating an affordable or any community improvement plan, and all part of the next steps and the sense I'm getting from the committee is you'd like us to investigate where we're at the budget, if there is room for reserves or anything to move forward quickly. But part of that's also going to be to take a look at the Planning Act requirements to create a community improvement plan. I think we've identified what the need is going to be, and part of what the development of the plan would be is to customize the appropriate policies and the appropriate to this process. They're establishing the program and definitely when it,
sorry, Carl, you're breaking up again. You're saying, Carl, maybe when you're on just audio only.
Of sort of practical experience assistances here too.
Sorry, Carl.
I'm going to turn off my camera here. That might.
Yeah, try that. So we did miss the last 30 or 40 seconds.
Okay. Yes, thank you. So there are a number. Certainly, we can through the process we can look at. We can consult with planning schools and see if they do have any sort of practical experience in developing this. But typically, there is a legislative framework that we do need to follow in terms of actually setting up the policy, setting up the program, and the consultation, and basically aligning the needs that we already know with a good, effective policy framework to achieve the objectives we're looking at.
Okay, so examine the resources that may be available to minimize the cost.
Yeah, I mean, just personally, since we're sitting on a affordable housing advisory committee, like I can't support $20,000 to go towards a consultation when we have 300 people in Lanark County who are homeless. Like that's silly to me, I guess, to be honest.
Okay, well, appreciate your comments, Ellie, and we know that's a critical issue today. And as you know, we will work with our county partners and hopefully leverage the social service relief funding and the money at the county to provide what probably temporary housing right now. I know there's a lot of real limitation on the options that are available, and if it's 300 across the county, then we know that there are significant number around here.
Very fair point. Thanks, Ellie. That's very fair point.
Okay, so so to the question, I guess what I'll ask for is a motion that we how do I phrase this, that council consider proceeding with the development of an affordable housing community improvement plan as soon as possible, and look in 2021 with the objective of creating a plan with, I'm not sure what the time, well, I guess we don't need the last part, just that council consider proceeding with the development of an affordable housing CIP in the immediate future. Is that fair? Is that someone move that motion? Jeff, second by Lorraine. All in favor? Looking here. Opposed? Okay, that's fair, Ellie. Okay, thank you, that's carried. Okay, we're almost out of time. I respect everyone's time. We have a number of priorities that were highlighted as priorities out of our 17 recommendations. I'm going to simply have Carl talk about item number 1 and 2 fairly quickly, because I think there's some potential barriers to implementing something while we are in the process of redeveloping our zoning bylaw, but there may be methods of trying to fast track some of these priorities. So Carl, I'll turn to you to talk about priority number 1, which is reducing the parking requirement.
Thank you. So as we discussed last week, and I hope everyone can hear me better now that my video is off.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. Yes, so I think the task force is very, as we know from last week, we've retained a consultant to develop a new comprehensive zoning bylaw that's going to, it's going to implement several of the recommendations from the housing report. I think we had a great discussion last week on sort of where we want to prioritize our efforts, what needs to be done very quickly, and what can perhaps wait for the review to be underway. So we did discuss this with we had a preliminary meeting with our consultants last week, and then we have another one coming up tomorrow. And the plan for developing, there's a several stage plan for developing this comprehensive zoning bylaw, which includes a range of public consultation. We'll be starting with a zoning issues workshop, as well as online surveys, in addition to the statutory public hearings. And part of that process is to develop an overall comprehensive policy framework that looks at everything together. So we want to look at parking, but we want to see how parking aligns with use provisions and general provisions for residential and commercial development, and all of those items together. So we understand then that breaking a couple of these apart and running a parallel consultation is outside the scope of the current project. We'd have to pull that apart and run a separate consultation. We would either need to negotiate a scope change with the consultants, or have that be run by staff. And the challenge we have, of course, is the individual things that we'd be looking at, such as accessory housing. I think we all recognize these are very urgent. These are very important, but they're also details that need a lot of thought. A lot of other municipalities have gone down those paths before. We can certainly look at inspirations for the town of Perth and a few others who've done that. But ultimately, these do have the potential to have an impact on the overall character of our residential portions of the entire town. So we want to make sure that we go above and beyond the bare minimum under the Planning Act for consultation. As staff, I'd recommend that we do have we do have a bit of outreach specifically on these targeted issues, so that we know that we're responding to what the community is looking for, in addition to fulfilling our legislative requirements. So just as a heads up to the committee, we're already partway there in zoning. The zoning bylaw today allows an accessory basement apartment, or it doesn't have to be a basement apartment, but an accessory apartment within an existing house. That's permitted today. So what we're going to have to do, the Planning Act requires us to, through the zoning review, is also allow these in townhouses, semi-detached, as well as detached units, so row houses. So we're already about halfway there. Our zoning is already about halfway there, and we've been approving these accessory apartments as of right, based on current zoning on a number of circumstances over the last number of years. So the zoning review would take us the rest of the way there. So I guess that's the question that we would have for this committee. Is there is a little bit of a that would necessitate a scope change and run a parallel consultation, and our concern is that may create a little bit of confusion with the work that's already being done on this project, as well as a few other projects in the town. So we want to make sure that we're not bombarding people with too much information. So communication is going to have to be carefully managed. So certainly with the committee's direction, we can reach back out to the consultants and see how we can how we'd want to coordinate that. But at this point, I would recommend we focus on, if the committee wants to break out policy, I'd recommend we focus on accessory housing, as there is a legislative requirement. There is a legislative requirement for that, and I think that's easier to look at without getting into all of the other details. But I'll look for the committee's direction and discussion on that. And Mayor Pankow or Carrie, please feel free to supplement what I'd said as well from a procedural standpoint.
Thanks, Carl. And you did fade out a bit there, but I think everyone caught the gist of what you were saying. So the one thing with the parking requirement and reducing that, as Carl suggested, it's probably better to leave that as part of a comprehensive zoning bylaw review. However, we do have the ability to make exceptions through site plan for parking requirements for developments. So Carl has worked with existing or sort of developments that are in the works now and under planning stages. And if there's a request to reduce parking, that's something that if Carl is comfortable with the plan and it makes sense, he can make that recommendation to council and we can proceed. So we can do that now on a case-by-case basis. When it comes to secondary units, the province did create legislative changes that mandated municipalities permit secondary units and coach houses and accessory dwellings across a spectrum of housing in the community. So not just single family homes like we have now, but also say townhomes, townhomes and row houses and things, semi-detached, etc. So so there is a possibility we could pull that out of the zoning bylaw review as we requested at our last meeting, and handle that maybe in parallel to the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, recognizing that that is maybe potentially more lower hanging fruit, and it may enable two things in my mind. One, the development of more secondary units. So it could be tiny homes and backyards, could be coach houses and garages, could be basement apartments, which does two things. It creates additional dwelling units and hopefully more affordable units. And secondly, what it does is it also enables people to get into the homeowner market when they have an accessory dwelling paying rent, which helps them qualify for a mortgage and of course enables people to maybe get into the market when they otherwise couldn't. So I'd like to have some feedback as to thoughts on recommendation 1 and 2 and what direction we should be recommending to council. And I'll look for hands. Lindsay.
Yeah, so for the parking one, most developments are going to enter into some sort of minor variance application or zoning amendment application for some other sort of relief too. So I think council dealing with reduced parking and focusing on a case by case in that respect is really better use of time and resources than trying to implement a policy change. I think as long as Carl actively communicates to the council and you as well, Mayor, that this committee is really pushing for reduction in that parking requirement, that they'll be more supportive and open to approving those for those items of relief. Asking for reduced parking as part of the overall planning files, people like myself and others file, is small to add to an application. So it's very easy for someone to do. I think the biggest thing too that like maybe for the group to have an understanding of as well, just on accessory dwellings, one of the main reasons why we don't see it a lot in row homes and townhomes is a lot of building code issues. So you have to be able to properly exit the building in 2 different ways. And often if you're a unit within units on each side of you, that really limits your ability to leave. So that's often why we don't see accessory units in those types of housing. So I'm very for policy being changed and amended there, but also building code's going to have restrictions just for the safety of people. So just everyone should just keep that in mind as well. It's often why you see basement units, apartment dwellings, and semis and detaches only, because it's very rare on a row home or a townhome that you would actually have 2 safe exits from a basement in those style of dwellings.
Thank you. Further comments? Jeff?
Regarding the parking issue, if there's a minor variance that's required, that comes at a cost to the developer, correct?
Yes, that's correct. There is a cost, there is an application, as Lindsay identified. Usually when we're looking at multi-residential development, there's a zoning or some other planning relief that's required. Not always, but usually it gets bundled in with a different planning application they already have to file, and it's not a substantial incremental burden, so long as it's reasonable in the circumstances. Staff are very likely to support it.
Okay.
And Jeff, on the secondary units, what are your thoughts?
Secondary units, I think it's a topic dear to my heart, and I think that perhaps our next meeting we should concentrate on that issue. I know Lindsay sent out a wonderful email with lots of meat that we need to digest and have conversations around. Another committee that I sit on, we were talking about the incentive to builders to build units differently so that they're ready to have both a unit outside and a unit within the structure. And it would be nice. This is a question maybe for you, Lindsay. You were saying that typically you don't have a building design that's ready for that. Is there some way we can encourage developers to see the financial incentive to them when they're building a home, that it could actually be 3 separate units, an outdoor unit plus a unit within the built structure?
Yeah, I think those developers are your single family home developers that we'd be speaking to at that point. Because otherwise, I mean, you just put it all in one structure. But I would say one of the hesitancies between single family home developers is they don't want to make things too unique. Otherwise, they may miss a buyer. So what I think could be highly encouraged is, and this is just, again, because people always think about sale and money, showcasing to them, you can pre-rough in a unit in the basement. The new owner finishes it. You can add that future building permit plan as part of the sale package. You could add in an approved building plan for a coach home to be a part of that sale package, but maybe the owner does it. Because at the end of the day, like those builders, they want to sell those homes quickly. But I think if we can figure out a way to provide more packages to those homeowners, this is other things you could do to your own home through sweat equity, but also through further income that you could get from it. But I think, you know, we have to speak to those developers, because I do deal with some single family residential builders, and they're very single-minded. They just want to build the home and go. And I think if we can just give them a bit of information to go add this to your sales package, to help people who may need that extra income, because also buyers, they can get a purchase plus improvement mortgage, and they can show that future revenue that would come in a basement as part of their income that a lender would then consider for them. They would have to complete it within a 60-day period. Those are other ways that like buyers could then get into the pool too.
I think it's a lot to do with messaging, and it's you know, your comments earlier about bottom line. There could be a bottom line for a builder to actually make more money by doing this, and certainly an incentive for a young family who's going to need help to pay for that mortgage if they could have a second or even third unit attached to their home. So I'd like us to go explore that a little bit more.
So thanks, Jeff and Lindsay. So we're quite a bit over time now. So what I'm suggesting we'll do, and I think Jeff's really made the suggestion, let's have Carl discuss this with our consultant tomorrow, possibility of a parallel plan for this, and come back at our next meeting with further information on how this works and what the possibilities are. I think, as Jeff said, I think we need a deeper discussion before we take this to council. Does that sound reasonable to everybody? Okay. So with that, I mean, there's some other items on our agenda, but we can leave those for now. Carl?
Sorry, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just to follow up as well, I'd like, when I report back to the committee, I'll also summarize what exactly the Planning Act requires us to do, and sort of provide a bit of an overview for what these sorts of policies can look like, just so we can have a bit of context, so we can maybe move forward based on that, if with the committee's interest, if that would be helpful.
I think it would be, absolutely. Okay, next meeting date. Now I know we're coming into vacation season. We have been meeting every couple of weeks. We want to continue, and I don't know, I guess looking at Carl, we're giving you some more work to do. Do you have a vacation planned in the next few weeks?
The week of July 12th, I will be off.
Okay. So everyone okay if we plan our next meeting for the 21st? I think would be 21st, 4 weeks from today, I believe.
We've been meeting every 2 weeks, Mayor Panko. The next date we have slated is July 7th.
So how's everybody feel about that? That meet everyone's schedule?
Good with me.
Which one, the July 7th or 20 something?
July 7th and 21st, probably.
Okay, perfect, yes.
Okay. Okay, we'll move ahead on that basis, and I'll look for a motion for adjournment. See two hands, motion for adjournment, mover and seconder, Ellie and Lorraine, all in favor. Thank you, everybody. Great participation today. Really appreciate all of your effort. I look forward to reconvening in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.